Okay, let's have a look at Schopenhauer, Arthur Schopenhauer. And Schopenhauer wrote a book called The World as Will and Representation. And he made it very clear in this book that he is starting from the Kantian transcendental idealism. He starts from that point and he credits Kant with, he credits him with distinguishing between the thing in itself and the thing as it appears, but what Schopenhauer will call will and representation. And so he builds on a lot of Kant's ideas, certainly, but he does criticize Kant at the end of this book. And so there are several points that he disagrees with Kant on. Certainly morality, he has a very different view of morality. And so they're not the same, certainly not. But Schopenhauer liked Kant's distinction between the thing in itself and the thing as it appears. Nonetheless, he certainly doesn't only repeat what Kant said, because what he says about the thing in itself, when he claims that it is will, clearly, unlike Kant, he thinks that we can know something about the thing in itself. Yeah, for Kant, it was totally off limits. The thing in itself was not possible to know. It was only possible to know the thing as it appears. Yeah, and this is why before Kant we had Berkeley, right, who said that, well, if we only know the world as representations, as ideas, we don't have any reason to believe that there's anything other than minds, ideas that exist. And this position was called idealism. Yeah, that was Berkeley's idealism. Well, after Kant, we get transcendental idealism, and there were a lot of German idealists. Schopenhauer and Hegel is another very famous German idealist. And so in some kind of way, they thought that knowledge came from appearance, you know, and the way that things appear, from ideas rather than from some kind of real world. Okay, so Schopenhauer starts with this distinction between the thing in itself and the thing as it appears. And he claims that the thing in itself is will. Now, we'll go more into detail down here of how we can know this and why Schopenhauer believes that will, whatever that means, is the thing in itself. So what does will mean? Well, let's start with that. It means desire, but I don't want you to think of it as intentions. I want you to think of desire in the psychological sense, that kind of desire that lies at the heart of everybody, that desire for food, the desire for sex, the desire for basic desires, yeah, you know, primitive desires. That's what I want you to think of as the will. I think that's closer to what Schopenhauer meant. He meant desire, not intentions, which are much more, you know, rational and reasonable. You think about things that you intend to do, and you get these intentions because you think they're a good idea, and so that's much more a rational process. That's not what he means by will. He means desire or striving, wanting, craving. I think in psychology they call it the id rather than the ego, yeah, that kind of raw desire. That's what I want you to associate with the will. And I want you to notice that the will is never satisfied. It always wants more. It's always lacking something, so it wants something. In other words, it's always suffering. Yeah, it hasn't got what it wants, and so it suffers. It's never satisfied. It always wants more. But the will in Schopenhauer is associated with unity rather than multiplicity. Now, you might attack his ideas on this point because, you know, obviously people have very different wills and desires. And so you can certainly see desire less, well, perhaps you might think of desire, I certainly do, not so much as a unity, but more as a multiplicity, as in lots of different desires. But that's not how Schopenhauer thinks of raw will. Yeah, the will, and clearly the world is two things in Schopenhauer's mind. Yeah, he makes this very clear with the chapter titles in his book, that for him, the world is both will, yeah, the thing in itself, and representation, the thing as it appears. So, like Kant, he seems to be aiming for a position somewhere between realism and idealism. Okay, so representation, the thing as it appears, these are the objects ordered in space and time. So he liked Kant's idea about space and time being intuitions of the mind, yeah, and that this is they